I'm Mark Hennick. This is So-Called Normal. Hey folks, welcome to So-Called Normal. I'm Mark Hennick. Today on the show we have Rona Maynard. Rona Maynard's my friend, but she also does a whole lot of other things. She's the former editor-in-chief of Chatelaine magazine. She did that for, I think, more than a decade. She's a writer herself, a memoirist. Her book, My Mother's Daughter, was really one of the models that I used in starting to write my own book, and she's been an incredible help on that as well. So we really get into, and that's the whole reason I wanted to have her on the show, really get into this idea of crafting our story, crafting our life story, and the impact that can have. I know when I went to write the first draft of my own book, and her and I talk a lot about this. This is why I bring it up. I went away, as some of you may know, to a Trappist monastery in the woods. I lived there for a month. And I wrote every single day, 8, 10, 12 hours a day, every single day. Woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning. This is my weird thing, go out into the woods and write. And what I found in doing that was that while I knew my story, at least I thought I knew my story, I was able to unpack and delve into things that I had never really considered before. And even more than that, when you're doing it on stage, you can only take small little kernels, mostly out of context. But here you're really weaving together all the different events in your life. And that was incredibly therapeutic for me, to be able to give the story a beginning, a middle, and an end, to give it a structure. So that's why I wanted to have Rona on, and she's a great person to talk about that. She also happens to be a fellow mental health advocate as well, and she talks a lot about her own experience. So I think you're really going to enjoy my conversation with Rona Maynard. Here it is on So-Called Normal.
I've been telling stories all my life, and I'm also a gatherer of other people's stories. I grew up in a home with very verbal, artistic people. My mother was a writer, my father a painter, and my mother could turn absolutely anything into a story worth hearing. She would go to the mall to buy a dress for my sister, and she'd spin this huge story at the dinner table about trying to get a parking space and a misunderstanding with the cashier, and it would actually be funny. She would exaggerate wildly, and sometimes I would say, "Mommy, that's not the way it happened," and she would say, "I tell the story the way it should have happened." She was also a journalist, and she knew how to make people open up. So I used to hear her female friends pouring out their hearts on the stool in her kitchen while she stirred the soup. Some of these women were having affairs. Some of them were leaving their husband or thinking of leaving their husband. And I remember being fascinated by a single academic friend of my mother's who was fluent in French, and she traveled all over France on her own, not having a husband. And she definitely was a woman of adventure. And I remember her telling a story about how a Frenchman came up to her on the train and put his arms around her and pulled her close and said, "Faisons-nous un petit plaisir." And let's have a little fun. And I was enthralled. That's how I learned that all of life is full of stories. And
what was it about your mother, though, that made people, do you think, open up to her so freely?
It's because she was interested. It's because she listened and paid attention and asked questions. People want to share who they are. They will hide it for a long time. They want it to be teased out. They want to have permission to be their true, authentic selves. And so they're going to put up barriers. But if you say, "Tell me more," or "Why do you think that happened?" or "What was going through your mind?" or "Why did you do that?" or "Why do you think he did that?" They will reflect on it. And they will come to realizations about themselves that they have never had before. So part of the thrill for me and the reverence of talking to people about their lives, which I do when I'm leading a memoir group, is being with them as their witness when they understand what happened to them and when they understand that this was important and that it changed them.
When they understand their nonfiction selves. Because it sounds like, people set up this fictional idea of who they are, this story in their head of who they are, whether or not it's true, because if that story falls, or if people reject that fiction of them, then they're not really rejecting them at all. They're rejecting this other construct, right?
Well, I found that people often want to appear in control and capable, and they want to seem authoritative. And when I was editing Chatelaine, I used to have a lot of over-the-transom first-person manuscripts sent to me. Many of these came from women who had survived a horrific experience of some kind, a life-threatening illness, or perhaps someone close to them, a child, a husband, had died. And they would always say very earnestly, I want to help people. I'm hoping you will publish this so that I can help people. And then they would represent themselves as some kind of expert on surviving cancer or losing a spouse. And what they had written would be, without exception, very bloodless, unfelt, flat.
Even though they lived it,
they lived
felt
it. But just because you lived it doesn't mean you can bring it to life for anybody else.
Interesting.
And in order to bring it to life for another person, what you have to do is enter into that experience and take the reader there. And in order to do that, you have to experience it again.
Yeah, you have to to show, not tell. As
to show, not tell.
Yeah.
Every writing teacher and every seasoned writer is going to repeat, show, don't tell, show, don't tell. It's the mantra. And for good reason. When Jan Wong wrote a memoir about depression, her psychiatrist warned her not to do it.
Really?
Her psychiatrist said, Jan, this is going to take you back into the pit of despair, and you should be feeling better. You should be thinking positive thoughts. Don't go there. And Jan realized, I'm a writer. This is what I do. I find meaning in things, and I cannot go on if I don't grapple with what has happened to me and write about it in order to understand it. Now, most people who write about their experience are never going to publish it. Or if they do, they will have to publish it themselves. But there's a lot of value in understanding it. That is the most important reason that I know to write memoir, to know what happened to you. And I've found, because I don't feel shy about my life experiences, there are stories I've been telling for years in an abbreviated form. But I don't know what really happened until I try to write it. And I'll give you an example. Lots of people knew, because I told them, that when I was 15 or 16 years old, I was molested by a stranger on a subway train in Boston at rush hour. And this happened in front of my mother. She was strap hanging a few feet away from me, smiling at her bright daughter, who was either going to or coming from her Radcliffe interview. And I could see this man's face while he was doing what he did. Anyway, so I would tell people that. And that was all I did. But when I sat down to write about it for my memoir, I saw him again and I felt his crawling hand. And I was right there again. And I began to hyperventilate, and I had to get up and I had to walk out of the room where I was writing and pace around because I was so agitated. I re-experienced his triumphant gaze because he knew that I would not say a thing. He knew I was just some scared young girl wearing a little dress with a Peter Pan collar who was not going to tell. And by God, I didn't. And I also remember feeling, you see, this is the question I ask everybody. So how did you feel? What was it really like for you? Well, yes, I was afraid. I knew I wouldn't be believed if I said, get your goddamn hand out of my crotch. But I was first afraid that I was imagining it. This is quite common in women who are being abused. I've heard of it happening before in adult women. There's this moment where they may think, oh my, can this really be happening? No, it must be my dirty mind. So there's also a feeling of shame associated with this, that I'm not sure if it's happening, and it's because I'm filthy that I am feeling these feelings.
But you seem to have taken some control over that in terms of writing your own memoir and reliving and then reclaiming that experience that you went through.
There is mastery to be found in writing about these experiences and saying to yourself at the end, hey, I went through it again and I'm still standing. And I know exactly what happened, and I have my take on what happened, and I'm not going to buy anybody else's version. I know what happened to me. And it might not be 100% correct in all the factual details, because memory is a slippery thing. One thing I do a lot of as a writer, and I encourage other writers to do it too, is to pay meticulous attention to the tone and texture of everyday moments. The writer is a gatherer of moments. And many of these are moments of beauty and humor and surprise. I walk a dog, and that is a very important centering exercise for me in every day. It's almost like a walking meditation. Very often I don't want to go out, particularly. I would rather stay in and be on the couch with a cup of decaf and the New York Times website, but I have to take him out. And while we're out, I see things, and I have to go slowly. I cannot just tear along because it's his walk, it's the dog's walk, and if he wants to stop and sniff, well, that's what I'm there for, to give him his happy hour. And while he's got his snout in the clover, I'm noticing what's around me. I find that if I have seen and felt something that was remarkable to me, there's a good chance other people will like it too. So I'll take a little picture and post it on Facebook with a paragraph or two about what I saw.
And I love reading those too, because I think that most of us, or at least, well, I can only really speak to my own experience, but we have these little transcendent experiences all the time, and they're available to us whenever we choose to look at them. But most of the time we don't. Most of the time we just gloss over those things.
No, and they are out there.
And
they
they're
are all around you. And if you pay attention, you will find these moments in every single day. And they will be a counterweight, to the things that pull you down. So not only are they beautiful to think about and write about, they are very healing. Mary Oliver says, she's a poet I like to quote, "The world offers itself to your imagination." And it does. And every day you have opportunities. That's been the best part of getting a dog, and that is why I recommend to people that if they are struggling and they have time to be out there with a dog, it could help them.
Right, to drag you outside of yourself in a way.
Yes, you get outside of yourself. Andrea Constand, the woman who was responsible for the Bill Cosby conviction, gave a victim impact statement that was shattering. And she said that as a result of her experience being raped by Bill Cosby, she can't have relationships with people. But she has dogs, and her relationships are with them.
To what degree do you think certainly we project out how we're feeling onto the world all the time. And it seems like a great gift to me and to a lot of the people that I talk to be able to see beauty in a world when sometimes your mind doesn't let you see that beauty. Sometimes you and I could look at the same dog sniffing the same thing, and you can find something really beautiful and interesting about it. But there's many of us out there who'll think, I'm just cold and I want to go home and this is shitty and everything sucks. And, that story that we tell about the world around us, I don't know if it's so much our choice all the time. I don't know. To what degree do you think that these charming little stories are reflective of a good place that you've arrived in your life? Or would you have always told those stories the same way?
No, I would not always have told those stories. I laid the foundation for this when I was climbing out of the worst depression of my life, and I'd been in therapy for it, and I was then in my mid-30s. The therapist had done a lot of good work with me intellectually, but I was coming to realize I had some destructive emotional habits that I would have to replace with better habits.
What kind of destructive habits are you talking about?
Always obsessing over what was wrong and not seeing what was right. The positive psychology movement has really come on strong since I went through this transition. But that's what those people are all about. Martin Seligman, the father of positive psychology, has an exercise called What Went Well. And it's a very detailed exercise. He's written about it in his books. And it's detailed, but anybody can do it. It doesn't require a whole lot of time. I did a baby version of that in the 80s that I read about in a magazine. And at that point, I would have papered the walls of my room with happy face stickers if I had thought that it would make me feel better. But I thought I'd give this, to my mind, rather silly idea a try. And the idea was that every night before you go to bed, you give thanks for something that has happened that day in your mind. You don't have to say it out loud. And I'd been having a lot of bad days, and I thought, surely I'm going to have days where I can't think of anything. This was never true. Never. And I learned to think of very small things that had, in fact, been wonderful and special. Like my son made me a Mother's Day card. I went to the ice cream parlor today, and the owner had just opened a tub of Oreo because he knew it was my favorite flavor, and he thought I'd probably come in. These were moments of pure joy.
Yeah.
They were small. But if I had not created the time to look, to pay attention to those things, they might as well not have happened.
Yeah.
I had an interesting experience in the workplace. I was having a very cranky day at the office, and I was snapping at everybody over little things that were not their fault at all. Nobody could please me. And I returned to my desk, and a woman named Natalie, who had a fairly junior job, had left a coupon on my chair for a free cup of coffee with a happy face next to it and a note that said, "Hey, Rona, I thought you could use this." And I really could use it. I went down the hall to apologize to Natalie, and that made it right between the two of us. And then that night I gave thanks in my mind for the coffee coupon and Natalie, because what she did for me, I would not have done for anybody else. I would have just thought, if somebody treated me that way, well, she's having an awful day. I'll give her a wide berth, and tomorrow she'll probably be feeling better. But that was not good enough for Natalie. I have told the story since many times. And every time I tell the story, it keeps the glow alive. I tell it in speeches. It's a very small story, but a small story with big implications, because there are Natalies around us every day. I doubt very much if Natalie remembers this incident. I think she is just somebody who leaves coffee coupons for folks who are having a bad day. So it's simply an expression of her being. But for me, it was a whole new way to be.
Yeah, and it seems like the meaning that you chose or that you needed or whatever that helped you really get out of that place that you're in that day, and it's obviously stuck with you ever since. So,
it has.
So to that end then, and in writing your memoir too, I mean, you could have taken any of the stories that you're told in completely different directions, but you chose that direction. You chose that narrative over others. And it seems like we do that all the time.
Oh, we do.
And you've done this with your story on the subway as well, and in terms of the narrative of your whole book. So, how do we get there? What is that a conscious process, or is that something that can be taught? I mean, you're doing these workshops. Certainly they must have an impact on people's personal life, not just their professional life as writers, right?
It does have an impact on people's personal life, because the story that they think they know has ossified in their minds. They've told it so many times that they're telling it by rote, and as they tell it, they don't feel it anymore. And I'm asking them to enter the feeling.
Right. How hard is that to do, to jiggle loose that old story? And does it ever come out to be a different story entirely?
Yes. Yes, it does. I remember a woman came to the workshop, and she had been troubled all her life by her relationship with her brother, her older brother, who had tyrannized her and manipulated her, and she was afraid of him. She looked up to him, but he would never acknowledge her, never seemed to feel anything for her. And I remember asking her why her mother allowed this to happen. Why do you think that was? And she had put up a barrier. She really didn't want to think about that. About the fact that she grew up in a home where one of the children was routinely allowed to make emotional mincemeat of the other. And it came out that her mother's adored younger brother had been killed in a terrorist attack in the Middle East. And this was, of course, well before my student was born. But she had been affected all her life by the fact that a beloved, beautiful young man had been killed in his prime by terrorists. And now there was this beautiful, accomplished brother who was the joy of his mom's life, and he could do no wrong. And he was allowed to tyrannize his sister. And when I asked her if this narrative made sense to her, she said that it did. And on one level, I suppose she didn't really want to think about the fact that her mother let this happen. But on the other level, it was completely understandable.
What are the types of stories that people bring into a memoir workshop? What are they trying to package in these kinds of things, make sense of?
Many of the stories are about family. People trying to come to terms with a really difficult formative family experience. One woman wrote about her son who had a chronic mental illness, and it was severe. And she wrote about the night when her son nearly killed himself, and she went to find him. The story had urgency. It had authenticity. She's a pretty good writer. She, I think, would be able to publish this. So that's one kind of story that people tell. A woman wrote about her beloved younger brother who was killed in a fire. And that was a type of story that people tell where they want to pay homage to somebody. And I push them to write about that person in terms that are not sentimental.
Right.
So show me who your brother was. I want to see him. Give me word pictures. Word pictures I talk about constantly. Don't just tell me he was the life of the party. Well, tell me about some of the things he actually did.
Right. How difficult is it, especially if they're writing about somebody who has since passed, to come to the point where they say, you know what, he was kind of an asshole, or he wasn't. These were the gritty, difficult parts. These are the parts that we disagreed about. Because that's part of the
it can be
real
painful.
Picture. Sure.
Because sometimes people don't want to admit just how bad it was. I have had a number of people come who write something that on the surface is kind of neutral emotionally, and it doesn't, but something's missing. And I remember I read one of them, and I said to myself, I just know this woman's father killed himself. And lo and behold, he did. There have been a number of people, including in the group I most recently did, who were physically and emotionally abused by their parents, who were really knocked around badly.
Trying to make sense of it now through
Well,
writing?
no, they don't. That is not what they want to write about.
Oh, interesting.
I have to pull it out of them.
Interesting.
But when I ask them questions, it becomes clear that Dad was a nasty, violent piece of work. And that they were afraid of him. And home was not a safe place. I suppose I shouldn't be shocked because we know these things are very common, but it's different when the abused person is sitting in front of you.
Sure.
And looking for all the world like a normal person, regular person, nicely dressed, has a good job, attractive, well-spoken, somebody who could be anyone that you know. And they've come from horror.
Yeah.
It's like a Stephen King landscape where they grew up. And this is why Stephen King is so incredibly successful, because he taps into people's deepest fears. And he makes it safe to go into the fear zone because it's not about you, it's about somebody else. The Shining is really a novel about alcoholism and what it does to a family. Mm-hmm. That is not what the movie is about, but that's what King wrote.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something he knows a lot about.
He knows a lot about that, being an alcoholic himself.
Yeah, yeah. My wife can't watch, it's not Stephen King, but she can't watch the movie The Exorcist, which is one of my favorite movies. Not because it's too scary, although it is a terrifying movie, but because she says, scared of the idea of losing control in such a way, of becoming possessed by something else that then controls you. And I found that a fascinating little picture into her unconscious and her upbringing. She was always the one who had to be in control for everybody else. And likewise, the things that scare me the most are the things just like that. And in working on my own memoir, which we've talked about quite a bit now,
yes.
The challenge for me was the opposite of what I mentioned before. It was trying to find the little bits of good, the reason that these people who did such awful things, within my memory, within my mind, why they were that way, why within their own mind. Certainly they didn't do it to be evil, to be bad, to hurt people. They must have had a reason, or maybe they weren't thinking at all. That was always the challenge for me, was to try to, and it still is, to try to see the complexity of it and not just make a black and white boogeyman narrative.
Well, they are characters.
Right.
They should not be stereotypes. Something similar came up for me when I wrote my first memoir. I'm working on the second one now. And I was not happy with the portrait I had drawn of my grandmother, whom I did not like. My grandmother was an overbearing, controlling braggart. Mm-hmm. She was insufferable and smothering. And she really was like a stand-up comics version of the Jewish grandmother from hell. I began to ask myself why she was that way. I thought, I've got to modulate this portrait somehow. I knew that she had come from the old country at a time of violence. There were pogroms there. She'd been raped by a Cossack as a small child and boxed on the ears by her mother when her mother found out what had happened. But I went to my mother's archive at the University of Manitoba to see what else I could learn about my grandmother. And I found some tapes that my mother had made at my grandmother's bedside when she was dying of pancreatic cancer. The first one was boring. She was just blathering on, as I always thought she did. And then toward the end of the second one, she cried out to my mother in the voice of a child, "Why did my mother hate me? How can a mother be so mean?" And I realized that was what had driven her all her life. She'd been rejected by her mother daily, relentlessly. And I knew that because my mother had told me that my grandmother's nickname from her mother was ugliness, that my great-grandmother favored her sons and despised daughters, particularly my grandmother. But my grandmother would never say a bad word against her mother. Never. She was the archetypal defended person who acts as if everything is fine. I'm in control. I loved my mother. My mother was strong. My mother was good. Well, her mother was a witch. That's who her mother was.
Now, your first memoir, My Mother's Daughter, very much picks up on these matriarchal themes, it seems.
Yes.
Can you tell me a bit more about that title, but also about that lineage, I guess, of mothers through your family and how you've been dealing with that?
Well, first of all, there was my mother, who is the emotional core of the book. Mm-hmm. A feisty, brilliant, angry woman who made a bad match to my father. She was Jewish, he was not. Her parents threatened heart attacks over this. And after my mother realized that she had shackled herself to a drunk, she couldn't bear to admit to her mother that she'd made a mistake. Now, it would have been hard for her to make a go of it on her own anyway. Single mothers were rare at that time, the 1950s and 60s. But she pretended that everything was fine. Your father is a brilliant, original man. You're so lucky to have him for a father. And I just wished he'd leave and never come back. So she had that narrative. And then after she threw him out, she had a new narrative. I married the wrong man. Your father ruined my life, except for the fact that he gave me these beautiful children, beautiful, brilliant children. So that was my mother, the short version. My father's mother, the Bible-thumping hellion, was an alarming woman. She was a woman of great gifts from England. Her name was Eliza, Lily for short. And her first church was the Salvation Army. She was one of the Hallelujah Lassies when she was 16, street corner preacher. And she had a gift. She could mesmerize people with her oratory, and she was tough. The story in the family went that when she was heckled, she knocked the fellow down. She just took a swing and flattened him. She wouldn't take any guff from anyone. But then they switched. She and my grandfather switched to the Plymouth Brethren. And the Plymouth Brethren had no place for women at all. She had to remain behind the scenes, and she couldn't preach except to her children, whom she terrorized.
Right. Took it all out on them.
Yes. Yeah. She had to have an audience, and she found them. This is what can happen to a woman of spirit and talent who has no outlet.
Right.
No acceptable outlet for her spirit or her talent.
So what cumulative influence did that all have on you and your portrait of what a mother is?
A mother is a daughter's first example of what and who a woman can be in the world. And in my mother, I saw someone who was clearly the most intellectually gifted person I had ever met. She was formidable. She had a PhD from Radcliffe. Her field was English, and she carried the entire English canon in her head. And she would just quote poetry at any moment when real life seemed to have a connection to Paradise Lost. If I was complaining about my fate as an unhappy teenager, she would quote the lines in Paradise Lost where Satan, who of course is a fallen angel, says, "Myself am hell." And that was my mother's point. You know, Rona, hell is in you.
Interesting.
She would remind me that I was like Satan. And this was the sin of pride.
Right.
She was also terribly funny. She could make a dinner table erupt in laughter. And when she was alive, because she was a larger-than-life figure, I couldn't really see her clearly. And it was only after she died that I knew who she really was.
Now, you had this really touching scene about when you were considering becoming editor of, or maybe it was when you were becoming editor of Chatelaine, and you were at your mother's bedside.
I was considering it. I was considering making a run for it.
So what was the significance of that scene? Why?
Well, my mother at that point had lost the ability to speak. She was dying of a brain tumor, and she had been my toughest challenger, followed by my husband a few steps behind, ever since I could remember. And if she had been well, I wouldn't have wanted to tell her, Mother, I'm thinking I'd like to be the next editor of Chatelaine, because she would be all over me with plans and advice, and she'd be calling all the time to tell me about some strategy that she thought I should adopt. But when she couldn't speak, I felt the way was clear for me. I could speak. Mm-hmm. And it is very freeing to speak to somebody who's not going to answer back. This is why some people love to talk to their pets, because they're not going to get a reply. They're not going to be judged. They're not going to hear any advice. She hadn't moved in a long time either, and I was holding her hand. And when I said I'd like to be the editor of Chatelaine someday, ever so slightly she squeezed my hand. It was a life-altering moment, because she was giving me her blessing, and that's all I wanted. I didn't want any advice.
Sounds like your parents, for you, it seems, were almost the head and the heart in many ways. Your mother's staggering intellect and your father's sometimes unbridled feeling and expression.
Yes, I think that's fair. I've never put it that way, Mark, but he had rages.
Right.
He had periods of terrible despair when he looked like the Ancient Mariner, and he'd been raking his hair with his hands, and his eyes were wild, and he feared that he had sinned. I remember him telling me in the middle of the night, when he was drunk, that the purpose of my life was to save my soul. That's quite a message to give to a kid who's 9 or 10.
So it sounds like you identify more with your mother then.
I don't know. I could have written a book called My Father's Daughter.
Interesting. And how would that have been different?
I haven't done it, so I don't know, and I don't think I'm going to do it. But I was very angry at my father during his lifetime. I took the attitude, as people very often do of addicts in their family, well, if he loved us, he wouldn't do this. He would stop. He would just stop. And
do you actually think that was true, though? Could he have just stopped?
Of course not. He was an alcoholic.
Right.
Birds got to fly, fish got to swim, alcoholics got to drink. And it was a compulsion. It was a form of self-medication. When I was a young journalist, I interviewed a therapist for an article I was doing about children of alcoholics, and I told her a little about my father, and my hand was on the door when she said, Rona, I have to tell you, your father's primary illness was not alcoholism. The primary illness was depression. He was medicating himself the way so many of them do. Not all of them. But for him, that was definitely the case. And I did not start to understand what had happened to him until I talked to other people who were alcoholics, friends. One in particular, a mentor whom I loved and think of all the time. And she told me that people become alcoholics to solve a problem, and then the alcohol becomes the problem.
Mm-hmm.
She'd been there, and I believed her. Mm-hmm. As I couldn't, you often have to hear these things from somebody outside the family.
Right.
Because it's just too fraught when it's your sister or your parent or your spouse.
Well, it almost comes back to that I don't know if it's dispassionate telling of the story, but trying to tell the story in a way that I can't remember the words that you used earlier, but to try to
understand it.
Yeah, to understand it. What
is the story?
What is the story? You can't be too close to it so that you're putting the wrong lens on it, but you try to tell the story authentically and fully, and that means stepping back a little bit sometimes, I think. But it's this weird duality between entering into the emotion of the story, but stepping back enough to actually be able to tell it as a writer.
Well, you have to enter into it. And you have to feel it, and you have to convey the feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But there is such a thing as being too free with your emotion and
mm-hmm.
just letting it spill all over the page. Some people call that a vomit draft, a
right.
term that I do not use. Once you've got it out there, you can edit.
Right.
Now
Anne Lamott calls them shitty first drafts, of course. Just
yes.
dump everything out onto the page.
There is another point that I haven't mentioned. Some subjects are just too raw and painful to write about for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I once worked with a woman in my group who was extremely depressed. She was on medication. She was also a formidably accomplished professional woman. I was in awe of what she had done. But what had tipped her over the edge, and she'd been over for a very long time, was a particularly cruel breakup with a man who had sponged off her for many years and then left her for a younger woman. And then he had done something else that was even worse that I'm not even going to describe here. And the woman was on the what they call in the blues, the killing floor. She sat there and she cried, but the tears weren't taking her anywhere. She was incapable of seeing what her devastation meant, what had taken her to that point in life. And she was incapable of believing that anything lay on the other side. Cheryl Strayed says, the last unwritten line of every story is, and after that, nothing was the same again.
Right.
And she was still stuck at the point where he cut her to her knees. She just couldn't see anything beyond that.
And does the writing process help to get past that? Or
no, not in her case.
Yeah.
And I told her that I didn't think she should try to write about this because it was too soon.
Yeah.
You know, it depends how obliterating the experience has been for somebody. The first breast cancer memoir, we think of that as a modern genre, was written in the early 19th century by a novelist named Fanny Burney, who had a mastectomy at home. And she wrote about it in a letter to her sister. You can read it. It's online. What she wrote is graphic and hard to read, but it's profoundly moving because you were right there with her. She didn't even know what a mastectomy was. And bear in mind, there's no anesthesia. And the doctors are trying to be kind, but suddenly she realizes what's going to happen to her. Anyway, Fanny wrote this in a letter to her sister, but 9 months passed before she could send the letter to her sister. telling her sister what had happened. And isn't that interesting? That's the length of a pregnancy.
Yeah.
That was how long it took Fanny to be able to tell the story of breast cancer. And by the way, she survived. She lived a very long life.
That's incredible. So what would you then suggest to bring all this together? What would you suggest to somebody who's in that phase, who it's still too soon, that maybe they're still going through it right now, whatever that obliterating experience is?
Okay, take notes.
Yeah.
Just record from day to day. If you feel like it, you might not feel that it's worth it. If it's going to make you feel worse, then don't do it.
Right.
But there's a difference between writing and publishing. There's a difference between writing and journaling. So if it's not going to make you feel worse, by all means, write down the facts as you
observe the experience.
As you observe them, because you might not remember. It's remarkable how many things we forget.
That's fascinating, actually. And I found when writing, too, how you mentioned how, I think your words were how slippery memory is.
Yes.
I actually noticed how sticky memory is, how you pull one out and it seems like a bunch of others come dangling out with it.
Well, that can happen, too. That definitely happens as well.
Yeah.
But there are also things people remembered that are completely wrong or happened to somebody else.
Yeah. There's quite a lot of research around false memory. Elizabeth Loftus, in particular, how two sisters can remember the exact same experience completely differently. The color of their childhood home, something trivial.
Well, my sister remembers something is happening to her that happened to me.
Interesting. Yeah.
But she deferred to me because she believes, and I think it's true, that my memory is better than hers. So I don't get too hung up about whether what I've written is 100% accurate. I think there is such a thing as emotional truth, but I'm not going to deliberately change something because it makes a better story.
Right.
My mother would do that. I wouldn't do it.
Right. Well, Rona, this is we have to probably wrap this up at some point.
Talked a lot with the motor mouths.
But thank you so much. I think that this idea of how we tell our stories is so important, especially now, in the conversation around mental health and the stories we're telling about mental health and mental illness right now. It seems like, to me anyway, that the pendulum has swung so hard in the direction of this is your brain and there's nothing you can do about it. And that's something that feels very uncomfortable to me, that, you mentioned Martin Seligman, the pioneer of this idea of learned helplessness as well, that how you tell the story and where you put the pieces and how you interpret it actually, I think, has a big impact on how you feel about it later on.
And what you pay attention to.
What you pay attention to, absolutely.
You can cultivate habits of mind that will make you feel better.
Yeah. Yeah, and what you notice moving forward, these great activities of gratitude, practicing that isn't just a nice fluffy thing that you can do at the end of the day, make yourself feel good. You actually start to train your mind then to scan the world for things to be grateful for, because you have homework that night.
Yes.
Right? So
exactly.
I think that these are activities and conversations that more people should be having, and I want to thank you for being a leader in doing that. Okay, that's it for my friend Rona Maynard. Isn't she great? She's just a really lovely person. And if you ever get a chance to check out one of her, if you can even get into it, one of the workshops she does on memoir writing, you can go over to her website, ronamaynard.com. That's RONAMAYNARD.com. I'll share it on my social media sites as well. And look into the work she does. Take one of her workshops if you're able to get into it. And we talked about that with Ann Douglas on a previous episode as well. So if you want to go back and check out that one too, how this idea of storytelling can be really important. So I hope you enjoyed Rona. Go and check her out on social media, pick up her book, and look into some of her workshops as well. What else can I tell you? Oh, go to my website too. While you're surfing the webs, surfing the intertubes, go over to my website, markhennick.com, markhennick.com/show called normal. You can read more about the show and see past episodes. You know where else you can get past episodes, including this one, and where else you can subscribe and leave us a really beautiful rating is on Apple Podcasts or any other platform where you get your podcasts. So head over there, subscribe to the show, leave us a rating, a review at the bottom. That would be really super helpful. And share it. Share it on social media. Tag me if you like. I'm on everything. I'm not hard to find. On Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Mark Hennick, at MarkHennick. If you want to check out, you hear me say this every single episode, if you want to check out a free trial of safe, effective psychotherapy online, wherever you are, if you're not wearing pants, just point the camera at your face, so that way you can be as comfortable as you like when you're doing your psychotherapy from home with a trained professional. So go check that out at betterhelp.com/Mark. Enter the promo code Mark, and you can get that free trial of safe, effective online psychotherapy. That's it for me. I'm Mark Hennick, if I haven't said my name enough times already, and this has been So-Called Normal.